Rachel Connor woke early, as she had for the last 30 years of her marriage. The pale dawn was just filtering through the cracks in the bedroom blinds. Alex was already awake. She felt an emptiness on his side of the bed. He always rose earlier, gave her a quick kiss on the forehead, and went for a run or straight to work. When they were first married, she had appreciated his industriousness, but now it seemed part of the routine of his alienation. She pulled on a robe and went downstairs to the kitchen. The quiet house greeted her with its familiar silence. The large house they had bought 10 years ago, during the heyday of Alex's career, now seemed too spacious. The photos on the walls, her children's graduations, family trips to Florida, a wedding anniversary were reminders of happier times. Now the children were scattered. Her youngest son was in another state attending graduate school. Her oldest daughter was working and raising her own children. It was just her and Alex, alone with an empty nest and a silence broken only by the ticking of the wall clock. Rachel busied herself with preparing breakfast, whipping up eggs for an omelet and making coffee. She liked to maintain the family morning rituals, even if Alex often skipped breakfast because he was rushing to work. She heard her husband's footsteps in the hallway. He had returned from a run, breathing heavily. A minute later, Alex appeared in the kitchen in a tracksuit, holding his phone. Notifications were flashing on the phone screen. "Good morning," she said quietly, pouring coffee into mugs. "Morning," he said absent-mindedly. He didn't even look her in the eye, his fingers running rapidly across the screen of his smartphone. Rachel placed the mug in front of her husband. Alex glanced at the coffee, nodded, and looked back at his phone. His face was focused, his jaw tense. Something on the screen seemed to be taking up all his attention. "I made an omelet with ham, your favorite," she tried to make him smile. "Wonderful," he answered automatically, without looking up from his correspondence. She sighed and sat down opposite him. They sat in silence for a few minutes, reading the news or his email, stirring her coffee and looking at the tired lines on his forehead. Rachel remembered the days when they would chat in the morning about everything under the sun: vacation plans, the kids' antics. Now there was a distant silence between them, filled only with the electronic buzz of her phone. "You won't forget about dinner at the Marks after work today." She broke the silence, reminding them of the arrangement. Their old friends, the Marks couple, had invited them to dinner together. Today, Alex finally looked up from the screen. "Damn, there's a meeting with a new client scheduled at the office today. I might be late." Rachel tried to hide her disappointment. "You promised, Alex. We already confirmed it." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I'll try to get out of this, but if I can't, go alone, okay? Give them my apologies." She nodded silently, clutching her cup. She didn't want to go to a friend's house alone for the evening and explain why her husband wasn't there. It has been happening more and more often lately. Important matters, unexpected meetings, delays at the office. She convinced herself that this was life with a successful boss. A culture of external success, that phrase popped into her head. Their family had always been proud of Alex's achievements, a high position in the company, the respect of his colleagues. She herself had once made a career in marketing, but left it to raise children and support her husband's ambitions. Deep down, Rachel wondered if it was worth it. There was less and less room for simple human communication in their marriage. Having finished his omelet, Alex stood up. "I have to shower and go to work," he said, glancing at his watch. "Thanks for breakfast." "You're welcome," she answered quietly. He went upstairs, and Rachel stayed in the kitchen, barely touching her food. She felt invisible. Around her was the cozy interior they had created together. Light blue walls, a white cabinet with their wedding photos still on it. But now this picture of a perfect home seemed like a decoration. A crack was growing in their once happy, strong family, invisible to the outside eye. Rachel felt this crack in every little thing. In the way Alex looked her in the eye less and less, how he almost never hugged her before leaving for work, how he hid the screen of his phone when she walked by. The silence was broken by the alarm on her phone, a reminder for a scheduled dentist appointment. Life went on as usual, as if nothing had happened. Rachel stood up and cleared the dishes, trying to suppress the growing anxiety. Maybe this was just a normal cooling-off period, she told herself. The kids were grown. They were both going through their own midlife crisis. They just needed to wait it out, work on the relationship. They had been together for so many years. Was it possible that things would fall apart because of some new interests or stresses? She wanted to believe that their love could still be revived. When Alex came down, already dressed in a formal blue suit, she plucked up her courage and approached him. She wanted so much to hug him, to feel the old closeness. "Have a good day," she touched his hand. "And you," he replied, taking a step toward the door. Almost automatically, Alex kissed his wife on the cheek, a gesture as formal as his business suit. Then he hurried away, grabbing his briefcase and still holding his smartphone in his other hand. Rachel watched the front door slam behind her husband and tried to push the feeling away. She pulled her hair up and began wiping the now clean countertop, just to keep her hands occupied. She had a doctor's appointment and then a quick stop at the supermarket. A normal day, normal chores. But the feeling of impending doom was already lodged in her soul like distant thunder. Her gaze fell on a framed photograph on the wall, she and Alex, young and radiant, on their wedding day. They had believed then that they had a lifetime of happiness ahead of them. And for many years they had, or so it seemed. Rachel felt a shadow of sadness. Did love really pass so quickly? When did their conversations turn into stock phrases? When did their smiles give way to weariness and irritation? Was this just a crisis she had heard of middle-aged couples and they needed a little shake-up? She hoped so. Alex nervously tapped his pencil on the table, looking at the laptop screen. The office was in the morning bustle. Behind the glass partition, he could hear the voices of colleagues, the ringing of phones, the noise of the printer. But Alex's thoughts were far from work tasks. In front of him was a spreadsheet with financial forecasts, but he did not see the numbers. Instead, his gaze fell again and again to the lower corner of the screen, where the new message icon was blinking. He clicked on the chat icon. A chat window with Emily, his junior colleague from the marketing department, opened up. "Morning, Alex. How was your run?" She'd sent him 10 minutes ago. Emily. He should have closed the chat right away and focused on his work, but instead he couldn't help but smile. Emily was more than a decade younger than he was, energetic, witty. They'd been working together on a big project for the past couple of months, often staying late at the office. The jokes, the cups of coffee in the empty conference room, the conversations on the way to the parking lot, all of it had brought them closer than colleagues should have. Alex answered briefly, "Good morning. Great run, 5 kilometers straight from the bush. How are you?" He immediately reproached himself, why was he maintaining this familiar tone? But the thought of Emily caused a warm feeling that he had not experienced for a long time. Something like excitement, even youthful love. He suddenly found it easier to breathe. Just last night, he had promised himself that he would limit his communication with her to business matters. Nothing extra. He was a married man, 49 years old. He had a family, a reputation. But in the morning, waking up next to Rachel, who was quietly snoring, he felt a painful melancholy. A feeling that life was going in circles, Groundhog Day. The same worries, the same remarks, the same fatigue in his wife's eyes. He didn't blame Rachel, they were both tired. However, everything was different with Emily. She looked at him with admiration, was interested in his opinion, and laughed at his jokes. In her eyes, he saw a reflection of himself younger, full of ideas and energy. There was a light knock on the office door. Before Alex could hide his smile, the door opened slightly and a familiar face peered through the crack. "Hi," Emily poked her head through the half-open door. "Am I disturbing you? I wanted to discuss the presentation for the meeting." "Sure, come in," he replied, trying to sound formal. He closed the chat window on the screen, trying to look focused. Emily walked in, closing the door behind her. She was wearing a light green dress and a light scarf. Her brown hair was pulled back into a low ponytail. Nothing special, just a strict office style, but Alex found himself thinking that she looked very attractive. He quickly looked away at the folder with papers. She walked over to his desk and placed the printouts of the charts in front of him. She leaned closer, pointing to one of the charts. Her perfume, a light floral scent, touched his senses. His heart suddenly began to beat faster, as if he were a teenager next to his first crush. I thought we should change the color coding here, Emily said, running her finger along the sheet. It's too colorful, the numbers get lost. Alex nodded, trying to focus on the graphic and not on how close Emily was leaning toward him. Yeah, I guess you're right. Let's tone it down and use a bigger font for the headings. Excellent, she smiled and turned the page. I also wanted to ask, have you already thought about who will present? Do you usually present yourself, or should I prepare? I think you should try this time, he replied. I'll be there to help if necessary. Emily's eyes sparkled. Great. To be honest, I'm a little nervous, but since you trust me, I'll try not to let you down. He smiled a little warmer than a department head should have. I'm sure you'll succeed. They exchanged a few more business-like phrases, and Emily headed for the exit, carefully taking her printouts. Right at the door, she turned around. Alex, you know, she began hesitantly. Thank you. You've taught me so much lately. I'm glad we're working together. Alex felt a surge of embarrassment and pleasure. Thank you, Emily. I'm glad too. She disappeared behind the door, and he stared at the closed door for a few more seconds, keeping his hand on the mouse, but forgetting about the computer. Then he ran his hand over his face. His heart gradually calmed down. What was he doing? For several weeks now he had been on edge, waiting for every conversation with her, looking for excuses to go to her floor. It was a dangerous game. But part of his soul, the one that desperately wanted to break out of the gray routine, did not want to stop. He stood up and went to the window. From the 20th floor, he could see the bustling city center. Cars crawling along the highway, people scurrying along the sidewalks, hurrying about their business. He remembered his own father. He had worked in one place all his life. He hadn't taken risks. He had been a model of reliability. And in retirement, his father had looked devastated, as if he had missed something important. Maybe now, on the threshold of 50, Alex had inherited this fear, the fear of living life without ever feeling its thrill. A midlife crisis, someone would say. And indeed, he knew that men had that. You suddenly want changes to prove to yourself that youth has not gone forever. Some buy a motorcycle or start running marathons, and some. Alex hung his head wearily. He knew in his mind where such passions led to nothing good. Betraying his family was the worst thing he could do. He loved Rachel. She had been his faithful friend and companion for so many years. And yet something irresistibly drew him there, to that dangerous line. The computer beeped a calendar reminder in 15 minutes. There was a meeting with that new client. Alex shook himself, tried to push away unnecessary thoughts. Work was still on the agenda. However, in the back of his mind, a thought was smoldering. What if he had already gone too far down this slippery path? And did he have the willpower to stop before it was too late? He remembered how Rachel had beamed with pride when he told him stories about his work years ago. When he got a promotion, she baked a cake to celebrate. But in recent years, things had changed. His successes at work had become distant to her, and they had stopped discussing each other's business. Had he pushed her away by not sharing, or were they both tired? Alex sighed heavily, realizing that the unsaid things and the distance had been building up for years. Dusk had fallen on the cozy suburban cottages when Rachel parked her car outside the Marx's house. The streetlights were on in the quiet street, and the neighboring lawns were filled with firefly lights. Someone had already decorated their yard for the upcoming holidays. Usually Rachel loved these quiet, friendly evenings. The Marxes had been their friends since their student years, and it was easy and warm with them. But today she felt out of place. Firstly, she had come alone. Alex hadn't been able to get out. He had sent a short message. Sorry, I'm late. Secondly, her soul was scratched by cats from his constant excuses. Linda Marks, a plump, always welcoming hostess, opened the door. She immediately hugged Rachel and led her into the house, exuding the aromas of roasted meat and herbs. Jazz was already playing in the living room, and a bottle of red wine was on the table. "Where is our Alex?" asked Ron, Linda's husband, smiling as he climbed out of his chair to meet his guest. Rachel smiled tightly. "Unfortunately, I was stuck at work. New important client, you know. He asked me to convey his apologies." Linda shook her head. "Oh, these workaholics. You poor thing, you probably haven't heard a warm word all day. Let me pour you some wine instead." Rachel thanked him and accepted the glass. She tried to keep the conversation casual, but inside she was shaking with nerves. Her friends were tactfully not asking too many questions, but Linda's sympathetic glances spoke for themselves. Surely she and Ron had discussed among themselves that Alex had been avoiding meetings lately. At dinner, they talked about the news, about work, about the children. The Marxes talked about their daughter, who had recently gotten married, and showed them their wedding photos. Rachel tried to be happy for them, but caught herself thinking about her own things, about how her own husband had become distant from her. At some point, Ron, under the influence of wine, suddenly said, "You and Alex are such a strong couple. We've always admired you, you know, for so many years together and still." He stopped short, noticing Linda shaking her head expressively, trying to stop her husband from chattering. Rachel looked down, embarrassed. "Yes, a long time ago," was all she said. The lump in her throat prevented her from adding another word. Linda quickly changed the subject, but the wound was already sore. A strong couple, if only her friends knew how fragile everything was inside their family now. These thoughts made it hard to swallow. She put the plate aside, pretending to be full. Later, after saying goodbye at the door, Linda quietly asked, looking into Rachel's eyes, "Are you okay, darling? You're not yourself today." Rachel hesitated for a moment, wanting to spill her guts, to tell him how worried she was. Instead, she smiled as usual. "Yeah, I'm just a little tired. Don't worry, it's okay." She hugged them goodbye and stepped out into the cool night. The stars twinkled in the sky, and her breath was colored with clouds of steam. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. But an empty house, and perhaps an even more empty conversation with her husband awaited her. By the time the key turned in the front door, the clock on the wall showed almost 11 o'clock. Rachel was sitting in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, with a book in her hands. She could hardly read, though all these hours she only listened to the silence and mentally chased away images, one more gloomy than the other. It seemed to her that the house was getting colder because of her husband's long absence. Alex entered quietly, trying not to make noise. He obviously thought she was asleep. Seeing her in the living room, he froze for a moment at the door. He looked tired, with a shadow of worry or guilt on his face. She didn't immediately understand. "Hi." Rachel's voice was quieter than she intended. "You're late." He nodded reservedly, setting his briefcase on the floor. "I told you, the meeting ran long. Sorry you had to go alone." Rachel looked at her husband carefully. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose. On his collar, or was it her imagination, there was a light trace of lipstick. Her heart sank, but she pulled herself together. Maybe it was just the pen that had leaked while he was scribbling. Or Rachel forced herself not to jump to any conclusions. "How did the meeting go?" she asked calmly, trying to break the silence. "Not bad," Alex replied, avoiding her gaze. "The client is capricious. It took a long time to convince him." He walked into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. Rachel followed him, trying to speak evenly. "Linda and Ron said hello to you. They're worried that we don't see each other much." "I, too." She hesitated. "I miss our evenings together, too." Alex gulped down the water and put the glass in the sink. "I know. Sorry, I'm really busy at work right now." "You were gone the whole weekend. Yesterday, you also came after midnight." She began and fell silent, noticing how he irritably shrugged his shoulders. "Rachel, what do you want to hear?" he asked wearily. "I'm working. I'm trying for us. Is it really that hard to understand?" She recoiled at his tone. "I understand, but I'm just worried. You haven't been yourself lately." Alex ran his hand over his face, as if wiping away the mask of fatigue, and answered more quietly, "Sorry, I'm really nervous. This contract is very important. Give me some time to sort things out, okay?" Rachel nodded, looking down. She felt the usual mixture of pity and resentment. Pity because her husband was clearly exhausted, the workload at work was enormous. Resentment stirred because he did not let her near him, did not share anything. Wasn't that what spouses were there for, to support each other? And he seemed to have fenced himself off. "Okay, let's go to bed," she sighed. "It's late." Alex nodded in agreement. It was clear that he was glad to end the conversation. He quickly kissed her on the cheek and went upstairs. Rachel stood in the kitchen for a moment, looking at the wet marks left by the glass on the bottom of the sink. There was a strange smell in the air, an unfamiliar Swedish scent, the same one she had barely caught when she hugged her husband. Women's perfume flashed through her mind. She wanted to convince herself that she was making it up, but tears were already welling up in her eyes. Rachel covered her face with her hands. For the first time, a clearly formulated thought pulsed in her consciousness like a fiery inscription. Alex has someone. Nothing has been proven yet, she told herself, trying to stop her hands from shaking. But her heart couldn't be fooled. She felt that trouble was no longer just looming on the horizon. It had already crossed the threshold of their home. Guesses raced through her head. Who was she? The one whose scent had soaked into her husband's shirt. A colleague, a casual acquaintance. Rachel frantically went over possible explanations. Maybe he really had been in a bar and some woman had accidentally touched him. Or was this just her imagination? But her intuition screamed something else. The setting sun was gilding the skyscraper windows as Alex turned off his computer and rubbed his tired eyes. The office was almost empty, except for a thin sliver of light from an open door at the other end of the floor. Alex glanced at his watch, almost 8 o'clock. He had stayed longer than usual again, but he didn't want to go home today. After yesterday's tense conversation with Rachel, the atmosphere at home seemed oppressive, and there was a morning meeting with a client looming ahead, and the presentation needed to be polished. He stood up and walked around the empty office. The quiet of the office in the evening was even pleasant. Alex looked out into the corridor and saw the light from the conference room. The door was slightly open. Coming closer, he looked inside. Emily sat at the large oval table, typing intently on her laptop. Next to her was a stack of documents and an empty cup. She didn't even notice his appearance at first. "Still working?" he asked quietly as he walked in. Emily looked up and smiled wearily. "Just finishing up the last edits for our presentation. Are you running late too?" "I wanted to make sure everything was ready. I see you're ahead of the rest of the world." He nodded at her laptop screen. "How's it going?" "Almost done," she replied. "Just a couple more slides to check, and then I can breathe a sigh of relief." Alex sat down on the chair next to her. He felt a slight nervousness, like a schoolboy who accidentally found himself alone with a pretty classmate after school. To hide it, he picked up a stack of printouts and leafed through them. "You're great. You've done a great job." Emily shrugged. "I'm trying to live up to your expectations." "You know, that's enough for today," Alex said, unexpectedly slamming her laptop shut. "It's almost 9. We've already done more than enough." She raised her eyebrows in surprise, then leaned back in her chair with relief. "You're right. My head's not working anymore." They sat in silence for a while. Outside the window, the lights of a helicopter circled smoothly against the night sky. In the distance, the hum of cars passing on the highway could be heard. Alex felt the tension of the workday give way to another energy, the one that emanated from the proximity of this woman. "Listen," he said quietly, "maybe we should celebrate the end of the preparations, have a cup of coffee, or a glass of wine. I know a place nearby, open late." He himself did not expect such courage from himself, but the words sounded natural. His heart beat faster in anticipation of an answer. Emily hesitated a bit, but her eyes sparkled with interest. "Sounds good. I can't remember the last time I went out after work." A few minutes later, they were walking out of the building together. exchanging humorous remarks about how strange it was to not be the last to leave the office. The night air was crisp and a little chilly. Emily shivered, and Alex automatically took off his jacket, throwing it over her shoulders. She smiled gratefully. "Thank you, that was a chivalrous act," she grinned. He felt like a gallant gentleman, and it was nice. They walked side by side along the sidewalk, slowly. A couple of blocks away, there really was a small, cozy cafe bar. Alex chose a table in the corner, away from prying eyes, although there were few customers. "They make great lattes here and a decent selection of wine," he said as the waiter came over to take our order. "I think a glass of red wouldn't hurt," Emily decided, looking at him warmly. "We deserve it." They each ordered a glass of Merlot. When the wine arrived, Alex raised his glass slightly to a successful presentation tomorrow. "And for great teamwork," Emily added, clinking glasses with him. The wine was tart and sent warmth through his veins. The conversation initially revolved around work, but quickly moved to more personal topics. Emily talked about how she moved to this city a couple of years ago, how she tries to find a balance between her career and personal life. Alex listened with genuine interest. He learned that she was single, that she had a dog, that she liked to go to the mountains on weekends, but often went alone. "Do you and your wife like to travel?" she asked suddenly, looking away sheepishly, as if she wasn't sure whether to mention his wife. Alex froze for a second. An image of Rachel popped into his head. She was probably at home now, probably angry or worried. He pushed the image away and answered evasively. "We used to love it. When the children were little, we would go out into nature with them, to the ocean. Now we do it less often." "I see." Emily nodded and added quietly, "It seems like a lot of people in long marriages grow apart." Alex looked at her intently. "What makes you think that?" She twirled the stem of her glass between her fingers. "Just an observation. My parents had it like that. And anyway, there are so many stories around. My best friend recently divorced her parents. They had lived together for over 25 years, and suddenly everything went to hell. She says that her father, well, he had someone on the side." Alex tensed involuntarily. "And how did she survive it?" "It's hard," Emily sighed. "My friend couldn't accept it for a long time. She's still angry. Her mother, too. You know what a blow it is. So many years of loyalty, trust, and then he bam, left for a younger woman." She suddenly stopped short. "Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't talking about you, don't think. I was just sharing." Alex swallowed hard. The situation she described echoed painfully in his chest. He imagined Rachel's face if she found out. Pushing the unpleasant thoughts away, he shook his head. "It's okay. You didn't say anything bad." They were silent for a few minutes. At that moment, the waiter came up. "Would you like anything else?" Alex glanced at the empty glass. "Repeat that, please." He felt the need to silence the voice inside him that was now screaming loudly about the inadmissibility of what was happening. The second glass of wine distanced reality even further. Emily switched to funny stories about her dog, and Alex laughed with relief, imagining her walking with a large, clumsy Labrador in the park. The tension dissipated. When they left the cafe, the city was already asleep. The streets were empty. A light fog was rising above the asphalt. Emily stopped opposite him on the sidewalk, returning his jacket. "Thanks for the evening. I haven't felt this good in a long time." "Me too," Alex answered honestly. The night hid their expressions, but he heard his own voice waver. They stood close, and at some point Alex felt her hand touch his arm, hesitantly, as if she were asking without words if it was okay to cross the line. He didn't pull his hand away. Up close, her eyes seemed huge and shone with the reflected light of the shop windows. Alex knew what was happening now, and that there was no turning back. The years he had spent with Rachel flashed before his mind's eye. Their wedding day, the birth of their son, family holidays. But then those images faded, giving way to another feeling, a keen, all-consuming desire to be with this young woman, to feel alive again, even for a moment. He gently touched her cheek with his palm and leaned in. Their lips met. The kiss was timid at first, as if they could both stop. But then Emily wrapped her arms around his neck, responding with such tenderness and passion that Alex's head spun. All the arguments of reason burned to ashes. His heart was pounding somewhere in his throat. He closed his eyes for a second, realizing that he was doing something irreparable. But he made a decision that had been brewing inside him for a long time. Let's go. The night city rushed past the car window with the headlights of rare cars. Alex watched the road with one eye and glanced at Emily, who was sitting next to him, with the other. She held his hand on the gearshift, her fingers caressing his skin. He could smell her perfume in the confined space of the car, and it made his head spin more than the wine he had drunk. When the door to her apartment closed behind them, Emily pressed her body against his, kissing him hotly with a hungry yearning for his proximity. Alex responded in kind, as if a dam had burst inside him. The thirst for closeness, tenderness, novelty overwhelmed him. Rachel, the house, the responsibilities all disappeared, left behind the threshold. What happened next seemed like a dream. He no longer thought about anything, neither the past nor the future, only the present. That night, Alex had cheated on his wife, crossing the very line he had been dangerously approaching for so long. The heat of passion made him forget everything for a moment. Neither his wife's face, nor the children, nor the consequences existed at that moment. But as soon as his breathing died down, a shadow of guilt stirred somewhere in the depths of his soul. However, he was driving it away for now, surrendering to a new forbidden feeling. Rachel woke up in the middle of the night alone in the wide marital bed. The room was dark. The phone screen on the nightstand was blinking 1:34 and her heart sank painfully. Alex was still not home. He had not returned from work that evening. Before midnight, she had received a text from him. "We'll have to stay in the office until the morning. We're getting ready for the meeting." Rachel reread those words 10 times, lying in the dark. Sure, he had an important presentation in the morning, but did he not come home at all? This had never happened before. She tried to fall asleep again, but her head was swarming with anxious thoughts. Rachel was up and about by dawn. She wandered around the house, tidying up automatically. She folded a blanket in the living room, put away an unwashed mug, little things Alex had left behind. A heavy, dull anxiety was growing in her chest. Thoughts she had previously brushed aside were now surfacing from all sides. Why had he become so secretive? Why did he barely touch her? Constantly on his phone, perking up when he texted her, then frowning when she asked who was texting. She remembered an article she had seen online recently. It said that excessive social media and texting were often bad for a marriage. It was even mentioned that every third divorce now begins with an online affair. Then, having read this, she sympathetically shook her head. Are people really ready to destroy a family for the sake of correspondence on Facebook? Now a chill ran down her spine. What if her family ends up in this sad statistic? Around 9 in the morning, a car pulled up to the house. Rachel pulled back the curtain and Alex stepped out of his sedan, holding his laptop in one hand and an empty coffee cup in the other. He was still wearing the same suit from yesterday, looking rumpled and pale. Rachel forced herself to breathe more evenly and went out to meet her husband in the hallway. The door opened and Alex walked in, closing it quietly, as if hoping to slip in unnoticed. "Hello," she said dryly. He started in surprise and turned around. "Oh, you're not at work?" he muttered. "I thought you were away on business." "I have the day off," Rachel replied, trying to keep the bitterness out of her voice. "How was your night at the office?" Alex didn't notice her tone or pretended not to. He shrugged. "Tiring, but the presentation was a hit. The client is happy." Rachel nodded, watching as her husband placed his laptop on the nightstand and struggled to remove his shoes. He was clearly uncomfortable with her intense gaze. There was still a faint sweet scent in the air, perhaps the same one she had caught yesterday. Rachel felt a wave of anger and despair rising inside her. "I was worried," she said quietly. "I hardly slept last night." "Why worry?" Alex tried to smile. I warned you. You've never been kept so long before that you had to spend the night away from home, she couldn't help but say, even in the most stressful years. Alex frowned. Well, it's a first. It's not a crime, Rachel. I wasn't out at the bar all night. I was at work. She felt a sting as if he had guessed in advance what he was suspected of and rejected it. I didn't say anything about the bar. Look, he rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. I don't have time to argue now. I want to take a shower and rest for an hour. Can we not start this topic again? Rachel clenched her fists, then loosened her grip. No use he was avoiding the conversation. Sure, rest. Alex nodded and went upstairs. A few seconds later, Rachel heard the sound of the shower. She sank into a chair in the hallway. She was hot and cold. Lying to her, he was definitely lying. He had that funny look last night, like something had happened. And that perfume, damn, was it true? Was he really? Without finishing her thoughts, she stood up. While her husband was in the bathroom, she had a few minutes. Rachel quietly climbed the stairs and went into the bedroom. Alex had left his phone on the dresser, a rare stroke of luck. He usually carried it with him all the time. He must have been in a hurry to get to the shower. The screen was black. Rachel knew that he had a password that she didn't know. They had never had any secrets with their gadgets before, but for some reason he had changed the access code a couple of months ago. Her heart was pounding. She could almost feel herself crossing a line. But he had crossed it first, if her fears were true. Her hands were shaking slightly as she touched the phone, pressing the side button. The screen came to life and asked for a 6-digit code. Rachel closed her eyes, feverishly going through possible combinations. The children's birthdays, their anniversary. His old code was linked to the year they bought the house 2012. She entered 082012, no result, incorrect code. She tried a couple more options, access blocked for 1 minute. Damn it. She heard the sound of water. Alex was still soaping himself in the shower. Then Rachel quickly went to the chair where her husband had thrown his jacket and rummaged in the pockets. Empty. Then she checked the trousers, neatly thrown over the chair. Her fingers felt something in the back pocket. A note? No, a receipt. She pulled it out and held it to her eyes. The morning light flooded everything in the bedroom, and the ink letters were clearly visible. The Golden Fox, 2240, 2 people, red wine, 2 glasses, dessert. Rachel recognized the name, a popular cafe in the center. Yesterday's receipt for 2, late in the evening. The world swam before his eyes. 2 people, late evening, wine. He was not in the office. His head spun with painful clarity. The husband had spent the evening in a restaurant, not with his male colleagues, but with someone. Probably with that same stranger whose scent had now ingrained itself in his clothes. The sound of the water stopped. Rachel heard the shower door open. In a panic, she stuffed the check back into her pants pocket, placed them on the back of the chair, and took a step back, hugging herself. She wanted to scream, to sob, to rush at him with this evidence, to pin him against the wall. But fear paralyzed her. Fear of final confirmation. Until she said it out loud, it seemed not entirely real. She could still pretend it was a mistake. She ran out of the bedroom and downstairs while Alex was still coming out of the bathroom. She ran into the kitchen and grabbed the edge of the sink, trying to stop herself from shaking. Tears were choking her, but she didn't allow herself to burst into tears. Calm down, she told herself. You have to find out for sure. At that moment, her own phone vibrated on the countertop. Rachel jumped and looked at the screen. Linda Marks was calling. She took a deep breath and answered the call. Hello, dear, a friendly voice rang out. I've been thinking about you since this morning. You seemed worried yesterday. Is everything okay? Her friend's question sounded so sincere that Rachel almost burst into tears right into the phone. She squeezed her eyes shut and forced out, Not really, Linda. I think I have a problem. There was an understanding silence on the other end of the line. Do you want to meet and talk? I can stop by if necessary. Rachel glanced up at the ceiling and saw the bathroom door slamming. Alex was probably drying himself off already. "Yeah," she said quickly. "Let's do it later, in an hour. The cafe on Ridge Street, you know where the bakery is." "I know. I'll be there. Hang in there, darling." When Alex came downstairs, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, Rachel was standing at the stove, mechanically stirring oatmeal. The kettle was boiling on the stove. She heard her husband's footsteps and pulled a calm expression onto her face, although everything inside was burning. "You're not at work?" he asked in surprise. "I told you it was a day off," she recalled. "I decided to make us some porridge." "Thanks, but I think I'll skip it. I'm completely exhausted. I'll go to sleep for a couple of hours. Then I might have to stop by the office again." She nodded without looking at him. He wanted to ask, or to her, but she was silent, staring into the boiling porridge. Alex stood there for a moment longer, as if expecting something, either a scandal or reproaches. But when nothing came, he slowly walked out, heading for the bedroom. A couple of minutes later, the door slammed. He closed it so as not to be disturbed. Only then did Rachel turn off the stove and let the tears flow. As she cried silently over the porridge that no one wanted, she made a firm decision. She would find out the truth and would not allow herself to be deceived anymore. The bell above the door of a small cafe on Ridge Street was ringing as Rachel walked in. She saw Linda immediately, sitting at a table by the window, 2 cups of coffee in front of her. Linda stood up when she saw her friend and hugged her tightly, saying nothing. Rachel melted at the warm, silent sympathy, the tension of the last few hours pouring out in tears, and for a few moments she simply cried on her friend's shoulder. "Say, Chach, it's okay," Linda said quietly, stroking her back. "Cry it out." After a couple of minutes, Rachel got over her emotions, and they sat down. Linda pushed one of the cups towards her. "I ordered a cappuccino, just like you like it." "Thank you," Rachel said hoarsely, wiping her eyes with a tissue. She felt bad about her weakness, but she didn't have to pretend around Linda. They stirred their coffee in silence for a while. Finally, Linda asked cautiously, "Will you tell me what happened?" Rachel took a deep breath. I don't really know where to begin. I have a sneaking suspicion that Alex is cheating on me." Her friend looked at her carefully, but did not express a shadow of surprise. Apparently, she already guessed. "What happened?" Rachel, speaking quietly so that no one around her could hear, recounted the events of the last few days. The late arrivals, the smell of perfume, the nights spent away from home. She even pulled out the restaurant receipt from her purse and showed it to her. Linda listened, squeezing Rachel's hand in hers. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly when the story was finished. "But it seems your fears are not unfounded. All the signs—" Linda broke off, seeing Rachel lower her eyes again, fighting back tears. "I don't want to believe it," Rachel whispered. "We've been together for so many years, Linda. I can't understand why. Why is he doing this to me? What was he missing?" Linda shook her head. "Honey, it's probably not you. Men our age sometimes go crazy. Midlife crisis, they feel like life is slipping away. So they do stupid things to feel young. This is not an excuse, but an explanation." "Crisis." Rachel smiled bitterly. "I see the crisis in the fact that he is destroying our family. And for what? For an affair?" Linda squeezed her hand tighter. "Look, the most important thing right now is to take care of yourself. You need support. I'm here. I think you need to have a frank talk with Alex." Rachel shook her head. "I'm afraid he'll deny everything. He already pretended yesterday that I was making it up. If I start without evidence, he might just lie to my face. Unfortunately, you're right. Some people won't admit it until you rub their noses in it. What are you planning?" Rachel rubbed her temples. Her head was pounding from lack of sleep and nerves. "I was thinking, maybe catch him red-handed. Find out who she is. Then he won't get away with it." Linda nodded. "That's an option. Just be careful, okay? Don't do anything that will put you in danger. And be aware," she hesitated. "What? You have children. adults, but still, it won't be easy for them to find out if everything is confirmed. Think about how and when to tell them. Maybe it's not worth it to involve them yet until you sort things out among yourselves. Rachel smiled sadly. I know. It hurts me even more. They adore Dad. How can I tell them that he... She stopped, taking a deep breath to keep from bursting into tears again. Don't think about their reaction now. Sort out your feelings. Maybe there's a chance to save the relationship. Would you like to? Rachel was silent for a long moment. Memories of what she and Alex had once been like, how they'd laughed, how they'd dreamed of a house by the lake in their old age. I don't know, she finally admitted. If he really, her voice trembled, slept with someone else, then I'm not sure I can forgive him. But part of me still wants it all back. Linda looked at her softly. I understand. Many people try to glue a family together after betrayal, especially after living together for so many years. It's hard, but possible. The main thing is that he wants it himself and is ready to work on himself. Without his sincere repentance, there's no point. Rachel fidgeted nervously with her napkin. He hasn't even admitted anything yet. Heck, maybe he never intended to. Maybe he's not even thinking about giving up everything for her. He's just having fun. Even more disgusting, Linda pursed her lips. Sorry, but that's how it is. Rachel nodded. The thought made her feel sick. He was risking their marriage for some fun on the side. It was enough to make her feel bitter. Instead, she felt mostly pain. They talked for a while longer, discussing various options. Linda promised to ask a private detective she knew, but they decided that perhaps the events would soon become clear. Rachel decided to watch her husband's every move with caution. Before saying goodbye, Linda said firmly, just please don't blame yourself. I know you'll start thinking that you missed something, didn't give him enough. But you're a wonderful wife and mother. His choice is on his conscience. Rachel thanked her friend for her support. They agreed to stay in touch. Later that evening, Rachel was restless and trying to read a book when her phone rang. A message from Alex. Don't wait for me for dinner, have to finish the report. Rachel's heart started racing. Another excuse. Her hand shook as she answered, okay. Then she immediately called Linda. He'll be late again, she said quickly as soon as her friend picked up the phone. He said he's sitting there with a report. I see, Linda's voice became collected. What are we doing? Rachel was already throwing on her coat, pressing the receiver against her shoulder. I'll go to his office and see if he's there. I'm with you, Linda responded immediately. I'll pick you up in 5 minutes. Run out onto the road. Thank you, Rachel breathed. She really was scared to go alone. 5 minutes later, she was already getting into Linda's car. Her friend pulled away abruptly, heading out onto the evening road. Here's the plan, Linda said, looking intently at the road. First to his office, we'll check if he's there. If not, we'll think about where he might have gone. Rachel nodded. She could feel her heart pounding in her throat. There was still a small chance that he really was just working, that she was wasting all this. But too many things were already saying otherwise. They drove in tense silence. Rachel stared at the windshield, trying to think of practical things. What would she do if she caught him? What would he say? But her mind refused to paint that picture she had hoped to the last that she wouldn't have to. Arriving at Alex's company office building, they parked a little further away. In the large glass building on the 6th floor, where Alex's department was located, almost no light was on, only a couple of windows were lit. The parking lot was half empty. Rachel immediately saw that her husband's car was not there. He's not here, she muttered, feeling all hope fading. What now? Linda pursed her lips. We'll think about it. Maybe he really did go somewhere on business, or to see her. Rachel closed her eyes, trying to imagine where he might be headed. The restaurant on the receipt came to mind, the Golden Fox. But he was unlikely to go there again so soon. Maybe her apartment, but she didn't know who she was or where she lived. We can wait a little, Linda suggested. What if he comes back here? or ask the guards. No, that's just drawing unnecessary attention. They waited for about 10 minutes. Rachel was burning inside. She kept her eyes on the entrance to the building, but Alex didn't appear. Try calling him, Linda suddenly suggested. Tell him you wanted to see how he's doing. I'm afraid to scare him off. If he's not at work, he'll understand that I'm checking. Linda frowned, but nodded. Right. Then there's only one thing left, go home and wait, or... Here she stopped short because Rachel convulsively grabbed her hand. Look. A familiar car pulled up to the office building, a silver Toyota, the one Rachel had seen in Alex's parking lot. A young woman in a business suit stepped out of the driver's door, and Alex followed. Yes, it was definitely his figure. His gait, Rachel couldn't be mistaken. Her heart seemed to stop, and then began to pound like crazy. Linda cursed under her breath. They watched, crouched down. Alex walked around the car and approached the woman, who was talking and laughing. Then Rachel saw her husband gently touch the woman's hand, then lean in and kiss her briefly on the lips. Rachel's vision swam. Even in the distance and the twilight, there was no doubt. Here it was, the confirmation. That's enough, Linda whispered, touching Rachel's shoulder as she watched her frantically try to open the door. Not here, not now. You don't want to make a scene outside, do you? Rachel froze. She really did almost jump out of the car and run toward them. But Linda was right. Making a scene in the middle of a parking lot was not a good idea, especially with a stranger who was probably a colleague. It could backfire on both of them at work, and gossip would spread. Let's get out of here, Linda said firmly, turning on the ignition. Now is not the time. Rachel nodded silently, trying to process what she had seen. She was shaking. One phrase was pounding in her head. It's true. He betrayed me. Linda's car pulled away smoothly, leaving behind the office where Alex and his mistress had disappeared inside. Rachel now knew for sure who was destroying her marriage, and ahead of her lay the hardest conversation of her life. On the way home, Linda tried to speak soothingly, occasionally touching her friend's shoulder. You're not alone, do you hear? Let's go to my place now. Don't stay alone tonight. Rachel was silent, looking out the window at the blurry lights. She was no longer crying. It seemed she had cried herself into numbness. Finally, she asked quietly, so what now? How to live? Linda gripped the steering wheel. First, we'll survive this night, and then, step by step. You're stronger than you think. I'm here, your children. You can handle it. Rachel nodded weakly, closing her eyes. She felt drained. But Linda's words had struck a chord. She had to go on living, for herself, for the children. But first, she had to get through the coming storm. Linda's car pulled away smoothly, leaving behind the office where the story of the end of one marriage and the beginning of something new, whether good or bad, was unfolding. Rachel sat in the dim living room, the light out. Outside the window, the night stretched out like black velvet. The clock showed almost 9:30 in the evening. After what she had seen in the parking lot, she had asked Linda to take her home and leave. She wanted to sort this out herself. Linda really didn't want to leave her alone, but Rachel had insisted. Now she sat, wringing her fingers, and waited. Chaos reigned in her head. Blind pain was replaced by flashes of rage. Then a wave of devastation rolled over her again. Rachel jumped as the sound of a car pulling up to the house sounded. She sat up straight, feeling her insides go cold with determination. The door opened and Alex walked in, as quiet as a thief. He set his briefcase down quietly and headed down the hall toward the stairs, not noticing her figure in the shadows. What, your conscience won't let you come in louder? Her voice rang out, hoarse with restrained emotions. Alex shuddered and turned around. Seeing his wife in the chair, he froze for a moment. Why are you sitting in the dark? He said uncertainly. Rachel stood up. She turned on the floor lamp, and a soft yellow light filled the room. Alex squinted at the sudden light. She looked at his face, and it reflected fatigue and guilt. She wasn't imagining it anymore. Let's skip the formalities, she began quietly, but there was steel in her voice. You'd better tell me how your report went." He looked away. "What do you mean?" Surprisingly, at that moment Rachel felt almost calm like before a storm. She didn't want any more evidence or guesses. Just the truth. "I was in your office today." Alex turned pale. "You? What?" "I saw you, Alex," she said crisply. "I saw you and that girl. How you arrived together. How you kissed her." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His face was distorted, either from fear or shame. Rachel did not take her eyes off him, feeling a small nervous tremor begin to run through her. "So you don't have to lie," she added quietly. "I know everything." A thick silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of the clock. Alex slowly sank to the edge of the sofa, covering his face with his hands. Several long seconds passed. Finally, he took his hands away from his face. His eyes were shining. "Forgive me," he breathed out barely audibly. Rachel's heart sank at the pathetic attempt. "For what exactly?" she asked coldly. "For cheating on me? For sleeping with another woman? Which of those are you asking for forgiveness for?" Alex closed his eyes and clenched his fists. "For everything. I have no excuse." "That's true," she nodded, still standing opposite him, her arms crossed over her chest so he couldn't see them shaking. "I want to hear everything from you. Who is she? How long has this been going on?" "Rachel," he began, looking at her pleadingly, "maybe we shouldn't. This won't do any good right now. Don't you dare tell me what to do." She suddenly raised her voice, amazed at where she got all that strength from. "Am I your wife, or am I nothing anymore? You owe me an explanation." He recoiled at her scream. Okay. Her name is Emily. She works with me. She's 35. Rachel smiled bitterly. "Of course. Young and beautiful, I suppose." "Stop it," he whispered. "Stop what?" "You lied to my face." She felt her voice break. "How long has this been going on?" "A few weeks," Alex answered, looking at the floor. "Do you sleep together?" He raised his head, his eyes full of pain. "Yes." Rachel's breath caught, as if she still hoped to hear no. She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she asked another question, almost in a whisper. "Is this love?" Alex's eyes darted around. "I don't know myself. I just feel good with her. Easy. She doesn't demand anything from me." "Unlike me, huh?" Rachel grinned evilly through her tears. "Was it hard for you with me?" "No, that's not it." He steepled his fingers. "I'm confused, Rachel. I'm almost 50. I feel like my youth is slipping away, and I don't know who I am anymore. All I did for so many years was work, provide for my family. And now," he trailed off. "In the end, you decided to destroy this family," she finished in an icy tone. "Because of a midlife crisis, right? That's your explanation." "No, I didn't want to ruin anything," he exclaimed and stood up, looking her in the eyes. "Damn, I don't know how this happened. I didn't look for this on purpose." "You weren't looking." Rachel flushed. "You went there yourself. You started flirting with yourself. You crossed that line yourself. Do you think this just happened to you? You made a choice." Alex bit his lip. "Yes, I made a mistake. A terrible one. And I'm sorry." "A pity?" Her voice trembled. "Can you imagine how I feel? I trusted you for so many years. I thought we were honest with each other, and you betrayed me like—" She did not finish, bent over from sobs that she could no longer hold back. Alex stepped towards her as if he wanted to comfort her, to touch her shoulder, but she pushed his hand away. "Don't touch me." He stepped back, his face white and sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." Rachel sat up, wiping her wet cheeks with the back of her hand. "But he did. So why? We were happy, I thought. Where did I go wrong? Tell me what I did wrong." "It's not your fault," Alex whispered. Of course, she threw up her hands. "It's just that you decided to have some fun in your old age. You got bored with me, right? It's not about boredom. I've been unhappy lately, Rachel, and I think you have been too. We've grown apart. Every day is the same. You've been so busy with the kids, with everyday life, and I felt like an empty space in my own home. A waste of space. Rachel's eyes widened. After everything I've done for you, quitting my job, raising children, supporting your career, creating comfort, you feel like a waste of space? I'm talking about what I felt, he repeated stubbornly. I lacked, I don't know, drive, novelty. I began to wonder what I had achieved besides work. And then she appeared listening to me, looking at me like you used to look at me, like a hero. And at home, I'm just a wallet on my legs for everyone. Do you think so? Rachel shook her head, looking at him almost with hatred. Do you think that the children and I only saw money in you? Aren't you ashamed to say that? I'm wrong. I'm sorry, he twitched, realizing that he had blurted out too much. I know you valued me. It's just, damn, I can't explain. It was a weakness. Cowardice. I was afraid of old age, uselessness, and I did this idiotic thing. And you continue to do so, she stated. You never intended to stop, did you? If I hadn't found out, you would have continued to deceive me. Alex slumped. I hadn't thought about it. I guess so. I don't recognize myself, Rachel. She covered her face with her hands, then lowered them sharply. Determination blazed in her eyes. That's it. Enough. No matter how you justify yourself, you've destroyed our trust. I can't stand it anymore. What do you mean? His voice wavered. I want you to go, she said clearly. Each word was spoken with pain, but also with firm confidence. Immediately. To her anywhere, but don't stay in this house today. Rachel. He began, but stopped short when he saw her raise her hand, urging him to be quiet. We need time and air. I definitely need it. I don't want to see you now. Alex hunched over as if struck. Is this the end? Rachel felt a pang of pity as she saw his eyes filled with fear, but she remembered him kissing another. The pain hardened her again. I don't know. I don't know anything yet. But if you stay, I'll just go crazy. He was silent, his head down. Then he said quietly, Okay, I understand. Alex turned and walked slowly toward the door. He had his hand on the handle when he turned around. I love you very much, Rachel, no matter what. She smiled bitterly through her tears. Don't say that. Your words mean nothing now. He looked down. There was silence for a few seconds. Then the door opened and closed. Rachel staggered and sank to the floor right next to the couch. The house was silent again, and in that silence, she finally let out her sobs, hearing herself echoing in the empty rooms. Her voice was thick with tears and anger, echoing around the living room. Her heart was pounding so hard he thought he could hear it. Alex was pale, his jaw muscles clenched, looking broken, but also trying to say something. Rachel saw a man both familiar and unfamiliar, his features, once beloved, now twisted with pain and remorse, but it did not soften her. Morning greeted Rachel with gray, uneven light seeping through the curtains. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her head was splitting, she hadn't slept a wink all night. Sometimes she would fall into an uneasy slumber, only to wake up from nightmare images. Each time she opened her eyes, she hoped for a tiny second that everything that had happened was just a bad dream. But reality came crashing down on her with renewed vigor. She stood up, feeling an ache all over. Her face was reflected in the semi-transparent mirror of the closet, disheveled hair, reddened eyes. She went to the bathroom, automatically washed her face with cold water. A wedding ring flashed on her finger. Rachel froze, looking at it. She hadn't been able to take it off yesterday, she simply hadn't had the courage. Now the ring burned her skin, as if reminding her of broken vows. She slowly pulled it off and put it on the shelf. It seemed to her that this simple gesture had broken the last thread in her chest, the one that still connected her to her former life. The phone rang downstairs. Rachel jumped and ran down. A thought flashed through her mind. What if it was Alex? But the screen showed her daughter's name, Sarah. Rachel swallowed hard. She didn't have the strength to talk to the children right now. However, she couldn't help but answer. "Hey, Mom," Sarah's voice was cheerful. "How are you? It's been a while since we talked. I was wondering if you and Dad could video call the boys. They miss their grandparents." Tears immediately came to Rachel's eyes. Hearing her daughter's voice, so carefree and joyful, made her feel unbearably painful again. She managed to squeeze out, "Hello, dear. Sorry, I can't talk now." Sarah immediately became wary. "Mom, what happened? Were you crying?" "No. I mean, yes, but it's complicated." Rachel felt like she was about to burst into tears on the phone and tried to pull herself together. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm just having a hard day. I'll call you back later, okay?" "Mom." The daughter's voice sounded worried. "Are you sure everything is okay? Maybe I should call Dad." "No," she blurted out sharply, and she immediately tried to soften her tone. "I mean, Dad's not home right now. I'll contact you myself, I promise. Just trust me. We'll explain everything soon." Sarah's voice was filled with confusion and growing fear. "Did you and Dad have a fight? What do you mean, we'll explain?" Rachel clapped her free hand over her mouth to keep from crying. "Honey, I'm so sorry. It's really hard for me to talk right now. I'll call you back, okay? I love you." She cut the call without waiting for an answer, otherwise she would not have been able to stand it. The phone immediately rang again. Sarah did not stop. Rachel turned off the sound and just burst into tears, standing in the middle of the kitchen. It took her a few minutes to pull herself together. She had to decide what to tell the children and when. They would notice quickly, of course, they were too old to be fooled. Sarah seemed worried already, and her son, he was more distant, but he would also have a hard time taking this. Rachel remembered reading somewhere that even adult children have a hard time dealing with their parents' divorce. It had seemed to her before that their family would escape this misfortune. Now she had to find the words to destroy their world. She went upstairs, dressed mechanically. It was about 10 in the morning when the intercom rang. It was Linda, with bags of pastries and 2 glasses of coffee. Rachel tried to smile when they met, but her lips trembled. Linda silently put the coffee on the table and hugged her tightly. "Did he leave?" her friend asked quietly. Rachel nodded. "I kicked him out yesterday. He left." "How are you holding up?" "I don't know," Rachel answered honestly, pulling away. "It's like a fog. My daughter's already calling. She feels something's wrong, and I don't know what to tell her." Linda shook her head. "Don't say anything yet. Take a break. You and Alex need to decide what's next before you involve the kids." Rachel sank into a chair. "Decide." He asked for forgiveness. Said he loved me. How cynical it sounds now. Linda sat down next to him. "Will he try to persuade you to come back?" "I don't know," Rachel shrugged. "I didn't give him a chance yesterday. I told him to leave. He didn't even resist. It's like he himself understands that he's done something irreparable." "What do you want?" my friend asked softly. "Do you want to try to forgive, or—" Rachel covered her face with her hands. "I don't know, Linda. Right now I feel like I'll never be able to. It hurts too much. I don't believe a word he says now." "Understand. But on the other hand, so many years together. How can I erase my whole life?" Rachel dropped her hands, looking tiredly at the cold autumn garden outside the window. "I'm almost 50, starting over. It's scary, and he's part of our family, our memories. It will be hard for the children." Linda listened without interrupting. Finally, she said, "Don't rush. It's too early to make decisions. Give yourself some time. Maybe you should see a psychologist. This is trauma. It's hard to cope with alone." Rachel sighed. "Yeah, I guess I should. I'll think about it." Linda took some still warm croissants out of the bag. "Eat. Haven't you eaten anything since yesterday?" Only when she heard about food did Rachel realize that her stomach was empty, but she had no appetite at all. Nevertheless, she obediently took a bite of the pastry. "Thank you for caring," she said quietly. Linda smiled. What would you do without me? That same morning, Alex sat on the edge of an unfamiliar sofa, holding a cup of coffee that Emily had made for him. He had spent the night at her place when he left the house yesterday. He had simply gotten into his car and driven to her entrance. For some reason, he had not wanted to look for other places. Emily opened the door right away. It seemed she had not been sleeping, waiting for a call. She greeted him anxiously and began asking him what had happened. He only said briefly, "She knows. I was kicked out." Now, early in the morning, Emily was rushing around the tiny kitchen, frying eggs. She tried to act like a loving housewife, but even Emily was uncomfortable. Alex could see it in her eyes. Of course, she understood that everything had changed. "Do you want salt?" she asked about the scrambled eggs, trying to sound casual. "A little," he replied. He felt like an alien himself. Here he was, dreaming of a time when he could be with Emily openly, not furtively. And now that moment had come, but why was there emptiness and heaviness in his soul instead of joy? Emily tried her best, but Alex could barely bring himself to smile at her. Before his eyes stood Rachel's tear-stained face and her words, "I never want to see you again." Emily put a plate in front of him. "Eat, or it will get cold." He took a fork and obediently began to eat, although the piece barely went down his throat. Emily sat down opposite with a cup of tea. "What are you going to do now?" she asked quietly. Alex shrugged. "I don't know. She said she needed time. Asked me to leave. I... I don't think she'll ever forgive me." He covered his face with his hand. Until now, the meaning of what was happening had not settled in his head. The family that seemed unshakable had suddenly split. The children, what would the children say? He shuddered at the thought of how his son and daughter would look at him after this. Emily, seeing his state, touched his hand on the table. "Al, maybe it's not that bad. Well, you'll have a fight, then make up. Don't go into a gloomy mood, do you hear?" Alex shook his head resignedly. "No, I know her. For her, betrayal is... She won't survive it in a relationship. And I ruined everything myself." Emily bit her lip. She clearly had nothing to say in response. "If anything," she said quietly after a pause, "you can stay with me for now, as long as you need." Alex smiled sadly with the corner of his lips. "Thank you. I don't want to burden you." "You're not a burden," she quickly countered. "I'm glad you're here, despite everything. I know you're hurting right now, but you're not alone, okay?" She squeezed his hand. Alex looked at the soft fingers over his palm. He should feel grateful and happy. Wasn't that what he wanted, to be with her? But his soul felt like stone. "You are very kind to me," was all he said quietly. Emily smiled slightly. Then she asked hesitantly, "What next?" "With work, we'll have to see each other at the office. Do you think it's worth keeping what happened a secret for now?" "Yes, of course," he sighed. "Not a word to anyone in the office. This is personal. I'd like everything to continue to look professional." "I agree," she nodded. They fell silent. The eggs had gone completely cold, but Alex finished them anyway out of politeness. He felt ashamed in front of Emily. He knew he couldn't give her the same enthusiasm as before. But something inside him seemed to have died. He suddenly thought about how paradoxical it was. He seemed to have gained the freedom to be with his mistress, but he felt less free than before. Added to this was the weight of guilt, the loss of his home, anxiety about the future. "Have I really destroyed everything, and for what?" flashed through his mind. He could not find an answer. After Christmas, Linda and Ron persuaded her to go out. Those friendly evenings that had once been a tradition were back, but now she came alone. The first such invitation had been difficult for her. Rachel was afraid of sympathetic glances and awkward silences. But Linda had insisted, "No refusals, dear. You're part of our group, period." The evening went better than Rachel had expected. Sure, she got some pitying looks at first, especially from Ron, who was not good at hiding his emotions. But once the conversation turned to more casual topics, a new movie, a planned camping trip in the spring, the tension eased. No one asked her about Alex, for which she was grateful. She was allowed to just be herself, not the abandoned wife. At one point, after the second glass of wine, Ron proposed a toast. To Rachel, the strongest woman we know. She flushed with embarrassment, but was touched. They had indeed supported her as best they could. It warmed her heart. Life went on, and friends remained friends. After that evening, Rachel rode home in a taxi, looking out at the city lights. She felt tired but alive. She remembered that long-ago dinner party at the Marxes, where she had gone alone before the divorce, full of anxiety and lies. Now she had nothing to hide. It was a strange, if bitter, relief. The truth was known to all, and nothing weighed heavily on her heart. A week after Rachel's life went downhill, she decided to see a psychologist. Linda insisted she gave her the contact information of a friend who specializes in family crises. While waiting for the meeting, Rachel fidgeted with a paper cup of coffee in her hands, sitting in a cozy waiting room with soft chairs. She felt uneasy. She had never been to a therapist before. But now she needed at least some professional support so as not to go crazy. "Rachel," a soft voice said. She looked up. A short woman of about 40 stood in the doorway of the office, smiling pleasantly. "My name is Dr. Nora Bennett. Please come in." Rachel crumpled her empty cup and followed the doctor inside. The office was warm and quiet. A few bookshelves, a couple of chairs, a floor lamp with soft light. Sitting down across from the psychologist, Rachel tilted her head in confusion. "I don't even know where to start." Dr. Bennett nodded gently. "Begin with what you think is most important right now. What brings you to me?" Rachel's lips twitched. "My husband cheated on me recently. We've been together for 30 years. We have 2 grown children. And a week ago, I discovered he was having an affair." The words came with difficulty. It seemed as if she were talking about someone else's life. The doctor was silent, listening intently. Rachel continued, "I threw him out. Now I don't know what to do next. I'm in so much pain. I barely sleep. I don't eat. Sometimes I just sit and cry for hours. Is that normal? I feel crazy." The doctor leaned forward a little, looking at her sympathetically. "What you're describing sounds very much like an acute reaction to trauma. The betrayal of a loved one is a very strong stress. Your condition, insomnia, loss of appetite, crying, is a typical reaction to emotional trauma. Over time, the severity of the pain will dull, but now it's important to take good care of yourself." Rachel clutched her handkerchief. "I don't know how to go on. I'm almost 50. I thought we had it all together. And now it's all fallen apart. I feel angry and hurt and ashamed." "Shame?" Dr. Bennett asked. "Yeah," Rachel nodded, looking away. "It's silly, but I feel kind of ashamed that I have such a broken family now. We always seemed like such a strong couple, kids, friends. Everyone thought we were perfect. And now, I feel like I've failed in my own life." The psychologist gently raised her hand in a calming gesture. "Rachel, your husband's infidelity is his choice, his mistake. It doesn't make you bad or incompetent. Unfortunately, this happens to all sorts of people. You have nothing to be ashamed of. On the contrary, it's important to surround yourself with support now, not self-criticism." "I'm trying," Rachel whispered, "but it hurts. I keep thinking, why did he do this? Maybe I wasn't good enough. No wonder he got carried away by a young, beautiful colleague. And I." She gestured at herself. "I'm an older woman next to him every day. I've become a familiar face." The doctor shook her head. "Let me be clear. The blame for what happened lies with your husband, not you. In a marriage, things naturally change over the years, adjustments pass, passion gives way to deep affection. Some people at that moment value their partner even more for what they have experienced together, while others, like your husband, succumb to the crisis, the temptation of novelty. But this is not because you are worse than before. It is because he did not cope with his experiences and chose the wrong path." Rachel wiped away the tears that were rolling down her cheeks. "I know, I understand with my head, but my heart doesn't control me. I don't feel sure of anything anymore. I think about how I trusted him, and it's like, she took a deep breath. It's like the ground has been knocked out from under my feet. Betrayal undermines our sense of security, the psychologist confirmed. This too will pass with time. You will restore your confidence in yourself, in life, but the main thing now is not to demand too much from yourself. Allow yourself to be weak for a while. Lean on your friends, on your children. Speaking of the kids, Rachel grimaced. They don't know yet. My daughter suspects something. I don't know how to tell them. I'm afraid to hurt them. This is not an easy conversation, the doctor nodded. But try to present it to them together with your husband, if possible, in a more or less consolidated manner. They have the right to know, but the details of the betrayal can be omitted so as not to traumatize them beyond measure. Emphasize that this is a mutual decision if you firmly decide to divorce. That's the thing, I haven't decided, Rachel sighed. I haven't filed for divorce yet. He seems to be repentant. He says he loves me, but he's apparently living with this woman now. As she said this, she felt a surge of bitterness, how ridiculous it all sounded. I see, the psychologist drawled. So the divorce has not been formalized. Are you considering the option of reconciliation? Rachel was silent for a few moments. I don't know. My heart says one thing, that I can't see him anymore. And my mind. My mind also says that betrayals are not forgiven. But the part of me that is used to being with him is afraid of loneliness. And the children again. I don't want to destroy the whole family. Your feelings are completely understandable, Dr. Bennett said softly. Many spouses hesitate after infidelity, especially if the marriage has been long. There are cases when couples restore their relationship, but it is a long, difficult path that requires mutual desire and a lot of work to restore trust, to heal the trauma. Not everyone can, and not everyone should forgive. Everyone has their own threshold. I'm not sure I'll ever trust him again, Rachel admitted honestly. If I even think he might talk to her again, or anyone, I panic. This is also a normal reaction, now increased anxiety, jealousy, suspicion, the psychologist said. It can remain for years if you try to save the relationship, and you have to work with it, sometimes your whole life. Some decide that it is easier to break up than to live in eternal fear. Rachel nodded. I guess I am one of those people. I don't think I could live with him now, knowing he did that. It's your choice and you're right, the doctor confirmed. Whatever path you choose, the most important thing is your well-being. You can build a new life, believe me. Maybe not right away, but you can. 50 years is not the end. You can have decades of happiness ahead, albeit in a different capacity. Rachel smiled slightly for the first time that session. You say that with such confidence. Because I've seen it more than once, the psychologist smiled warmly. Women who survived betrayals, divorces, started over, and still found their happiness in children, in new hobbies, even in new relationships. The main thing is not to lose yourself now. I'll try, Rachel sighed. The hour of conversation flew by. Rachel felt a little better as she left the office, having just talked it out and received support. Dr. Bennett suggested that she come back in a week and call anytime if things got too tough. As Rachel walked home, she thought about the decision she needed to make. She still had doubts, but she was increasingly inclined to believe that the marriage was over. The wound was too deep, the disappointment too profound. And sadly, it was this realization that brought her a grain of relief. For the first time, there was no agonizing, what if ahead, but a concrete path, to go through a divorce and start over. Although it was scary, maybe it would be better for both of them. 2 weeks after the breakup, Rachel and Alex decided it was time to talk to their children. They couldn't wait any longer. Sarah was calling almost every day, anxiously asking what was going on. Their youngest son, Jason, also became suspicious when his mother consistently avoided video calls. The call was arranged on Saturday afternoon. Sarah came in person. She couldn't sit idly by in the unknown. Her son was far away studying in another state, so he connected via video link. They gathered in the living room of the Connors' house. Rachel sat nervously on the couch, Alex nearby, but on the edge, holding a glass of water between his palms, which he never drank. Sarah sat opposite, her kids stayed home with her husband. On the tablet screen was Jason's face, worried and serious. He said he had locked himself in a private room in the dorm to talk in peace. Well, Alex began after a heavy pause. Thank you for coming. Mom and I wanted to tell you something. Rachel glanced at him. We had been hard for her, but for the sake of the children, she had agreed to suppress her personal pain and remain official. Just don't tell me. Sarah's voice trembled. That you're getting divorced. Rachel looked down and Alex nodded slowly. That's exactly what we need to say. On the screen, the sun straightened up. What? Are you serious? Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God. Why? What happened? Rachel felt a lump in her throat. She couldn't speak. Alex cleared his throat. It was a tough decision. We've been together for a long time, but sometimes people grow apart. We decided it was best for everyone. Sarah looked up from under her brows, her eyes already shining with tears. What do you mean, best for everyone? What are you talking about? You've been together for 30 years. You have grandchildren. Her voice broke. Jason frowned. Dad, Mom, is this some kind of weird prank? Everything was fine with you, and then... No, that can't happen. There has to be a reason. There are always reasons, Rachel said quietly, finally gathering her strength. We did grow apart, and the trust is gone. She had no intention of talking openly about betrayal, but she let it slip about trust. Her son immediately picked up. Trust? What? Someone doesn't trust someone. He looked from his mother to his father. Suddenly, his face darkened. Dad, did you do something? Alex turned blotchy. He was silent, not knowing what to answer. Sarah took her hand away from her mouth and asked quietly, looking straight at her mother, Mom, did he cheat on you? The question hung in the air. Rachel froze. She felt Alex holding his breath, too. Please tell the truth, Sarah added. I need to know. Rachel nodded slowly, without looking up. Yes. Sarah cursed softly through her tears and leaned back in her chair, covering her face with her hands. On the screen, Jason also lowered his head, closing his eyes. For a few seconds, all that was heard was her sobbing. With whom? She suddenly asked sharply, dropping her hands. How long did this last, Dad? Sarah. Alex began helplessly. It doesn't matter, Rachel snapped firmly, looking at her daughter. It's no use. The main thing is, yes, he betrayed me. That's why I can't live with him anymore. Sarah jumped up sobbing and ran to her mother, hugging her. Mommy, oh God. She was crying, and Rachel stroked her hair, barely holding back her own sobs. Forgive me, Alex said hoarsely, looking at the children. I didn't mean to. I ruined everything. Jason opened his eyes, full of tears. How could you, Dad, after all these years? I always looked up to you, thought you and Mom were perfect. And now what? Our family. He didn't finish, but it was clear. It felt like the whole world was falling apart, like everyone else. Sarah stopped crying and, straightening up, threw an angry look at her father. You know, don't even dare ask for forgiveness. You have no idea what you've done. You ruined our family, Dad. Ruined. I feel like our family is dead. Understand? Alex covered his face with his hand. He was silent. There was nothing to object to. Jason asked quietly, Are you sure you've decided to get a divorce? Maybe there's a chance to save it. Rachel shook her head, feeling Sarah squeeze her hand again. No, Jay, we're set in our ways. It was Mom's decision, Sarah said dryly, wiping away her tears. Mom, I support you, and you need to come to us, really. You'll live with us, and he, she nodded toward her father, can go wherever he wants. Sarah. Alex stammered, Please don't turn the children against me. I'm not setting anyone up. You did it all yourself. The daughter exploded. You know, you don't even have to try to come to our place for the holidays. I'm not sure I want to see you around my children now. Darling, don't say that, Rachel tried to reason with her, although it warmed her heart that her daughter was so zealous for her. But Sarah didn't calm down. No, Mom, I'm serious. I feel disgusted looking at him now. Jason on the screen also nodded grimly. Dad, you better give us all some time. I don't know what to say. I understand, was all Alex could say. There was a heavy silence, broken only by sobs. Finally, Rachel put her arm around her daughter's shoulders and said, I love you, kids. We'll take care of everything. Of course, you'll need time to accept this. Just know that we'll always be your parents. Jason nodded, wiping his eyes. I guess I need some time alone. Sarah stood up. Mom and I will talk later. And you, Dad, you better leave now. Rachel glanced at her daughter, who was adamant, and she decided not to interfere. Alex got the hint, too. Heavily rising, he said toward the screen, Bye, Jay. I'm sorry. The son just shook his head sadly. Alex looked at his daughter. Sarah, Not now, she snapped harshly. He slumped his shoulders and, glancing at Rachel, who was avoiding his gaze, slowly walked out of the living room. When the front door slammed, Sarah burst into tears again, and Rachel couldn't hold back any more. They cried together, while on the screen Jason looked distantly, as if he still couldn't believe that all this was happening for real. After Alex left, Sarah cried for a long time, hugging her mother. Jason said quietly from the screen, We'll get through this, Mom. We still have a family, us, you, the grandchildren. We love you very much. Rachel nodded, wiping away her tears and trying to smile at her son. And I love you, my dears. We'll definitely get through this. Sarah raised her tear-stained face. Yes, Mom, we are together, and we will not leave you. The words warmed Rachel's soul. Her children had become her support system, just as she had once been theirs. They would have a hard time adjusting, but she knew one thing for sure: she would be strong for them. In the following weeks, life seemed to switch to another mode, businesslike, everyday, but no less sad. Rachel and Alex hardly communicated directly. They resolved all necessary issues via email or short, dry messages. Rachel found herself a divorce lawyer on the advice of the same Linda, and was now collecting documents, statements, property lists. One day, leaving the supermarket with a bag of groceries, Rachel ran into an old acquaintance, Mrs. Henderson, who lived on the next street. She smiled warmly. Rachel, dear, I haven't seen you for a while. How are you and Alex? Rachel froze for a moment, then forced a polite smile. Thank you, not bad. Do the children visit? Are the grandchildren probably making you happy? The neighbor continued, not noticing the tension on Rachel's face. Yes, Sarah is doing well. The boys are growing up. Rachel nodded, trying to quickly end the conversation. Say hello to Alex, she said as she left. Rachel just nodded, looking away. She wanted to get in the car and burst into tears, but no tears came. It was as if her emotions had already burned out, leaving only emptiness. In those weeks, news of the impending divorce had spread only among close friends. Friends were shocked. Many called to offer their support. Some, like Mrs. Henderson, did not yet know. Rachel had no intention of explaining it to everyone. They would find out eventually. Meanwhile, she was completely immersed in practical matters. It was even a little distracting, filling out paperwork, looking for old financial reports, making a list of jointly acquired property. And they had managed to accumulate quite a lot over 3 decades. A house, savings, pension accounts, 2 cars, shares in the company where Alex worked, and also a dacha by the lake, once bought for a family vacation. Alex, for his part, hired a lawyer. Fortunately, there was no big argument. He initially agreed to everything Rachel asked for, perhaps out of guilt or because he wanted to get the process over with. He wrote to her in one letter, Tell me what you need, and we'll do it. But Rachel wasn't going to take everything from him. She wanted justice. Her lawyer, Miss Garcia, was a middle-aged, experienced woman, polite but tough in her dealings. At their first consultation, they sat in her office overlooking a city park. Rachel was nervous, fiddling with a handkerchief in her lap. So, Miss Garcia leafed through the folder of data. Married for 30 years, 2 grown children. Main assets: house, summer house, husband's pension savings, bank accounts, stocks, car. You haven't officially worked in recent years, right? Yes, I left my job many years ago to take care of the children and the house, Rachel confirmed. The lawyer nodded. I see. In our state, property is divided equally, regardless of the reason for the divorce. Adultery does not count. Such are the no-fault laws. However, given your contribution as a housewife and the length of the marriage, you are entitled to a substantial share and probably alimony. Rachel smiled weakly. She didn't like the word alimony. I don't want to humiliate him or squeeze him dry. I just need to secure my future. We're both close to retirement. Of course, Miss Garcia nodded. You'll be entitled to a portion of his retirement savings. Also, given the difference in income and the fact that you sacrificed your career, the court will likely award you spousal support. Although perhaps we can agree amicably on monthly payments so as not to drag everything into court. Rachel felt uneasy about all this financial calculation, but she understood the need. And the house? I'd like to keep it if I can. It's where my memories are. And they bring their grandchildren. It's spacious for them. You can leave the house to yourself, the lawyer agreed, but then perhaps your husband will receive something equivalent in return from other assets. Or you can buy out his share, perhaps using the same pension money. Good. I don't think he'll mind. He seems to agree with me staying in the house. That's great. The fewer controversial points, the faster and easier everything will go. Rachel nodded. She gathered her courage and asked what was bothering her. Tell me, approximately how long will this take? I'd like to get this over with. Miss Garcia smiled knowingly. It usually takes 3 to 6 months from filing the documents to the final decision if there are no complications. We can formalize the agreement of the parties and file it in court as irreconcilable differences. I think everything will go smoothly for us, since the husband is willing to cooperate. Rachel quietly thanked him and said goodbye to the lawyer, arranging another meeting to sign the necessary papers. She stepped out of the law office and breathed in the cool autumn air. Her soul was heavy, but at least it was clear that the process had begun. A divorce, division of property, a new life awaited her. Without Alex. That evening, Alex also received a letter from his lawyer with a list of conditions. As expected, Rachel was asking for half of everything and the right to stay in the house. Alex breathed a sigh of relief. She hadn't asked for anything outrageous. He was ready to sign whatever was needed. Money was the least of his worries right now. There were much more important things at stake, his relationships with his children, for example, which were hanging by a thread. The business side of the divorce, however, was proceeding surprisingly peacefully. Rachel and Alex answered lawyers' questions separately, signed papers, but rarely crossed paths in person. They did meet once, however, to negotiate a house. They chose neutral territory, a conference room at a law firm. Rachel caught herself thinking strangely. Their 30-year union was now being broken down into bills, interest, and real estate, like a business deal. It was bitter to her, but she understood that there was no other way. Love cannot be measured by formulas, but a broken marriage can be measured in monetary sums. She glanced furtively at Alex. He sat with his eyes downcast, looking aged and faded. Once, at the dawn of their marriage, they had dreamed of growing old together, imagining how they would babysit grandchildren, travel. Now those dreams had crumbled, and in their place were cold numbers on paper. It was a short, awkward meeting. They said hello, sat down at a long table. The lawyers laid out the plan they had already agreed upon. Rachel would keep the house, and Alex would get her share of the cottage and most of the cash savings. The retirement accounts would be divided. Alex would agree to pay Rachel monthly support for 10 years. Everyone nodded, signed pages of paperwork. Rachel barely looked at her ex-husband. He, too, remained silent, answering only to the point. When it was all over, They were alone for the first time in a long time. The lawyers went out to draw up copies. Alex risked speaking. "Are you okay?" Rachel shrugged. "As much as possible." "I'm glad we're doing this in a civilized manner," he continued hesitantly. "If there's anything else you need, I'll help." She nodded, not knowing what to say. She had no desire to have a heart-to-heart talk. Everything that needed to be said had already been said. "I am grateful to you," he began, but fell silent under the gaze of her cold eyes. A minute later, the lawyers returned, and the awkward moment was over. Alex and Rachel parted ways, saying only a dry goodbye. Both of their hearts were heavy with this official finality, but also a little relieved. The most painful phase was coming to an end. The day of the divorce was cold and clear. In the narrow hallway of the city courthouse, Rachel sat on a hard bench, clasping her hands. She wore a navy blue suit, the same one she had worn to her daughter's wedding a few years earlier. Then she felt proud and happy. Now, only a quiet nervousness and sadness. Miss Garcia stood nearby, looking through some papers. Alex and the lawyer sat a little further away. The former spouses barely looked at each other. The procedure was brief and almost impersonal. They were called into the judge's office, a short, bespectacled man who seemed to have seen 1,000 such couples before. The judge checked the paperwork, made sure the property settlement had been made voluntarily. Then he asked each of them, "Are you claiming that the marriage has broken down irretrievably and asking for a divorce?" "Yes," Rachel answered quietly. "Yes," Alex echoed. The judge nodded and signed the form. "Well, the marriage between Alexander Connor and Rachel Connor is dissolved. I wish you luck." That was it. With one stroke of the pen, 3 decades of marriage were officially over. Rachel felt a little dizzy, but she pulled herself together. She and Alex signed copies of the decision. Miss Garcia patted her on the shoulder. "You're free now," she said with a slightly sad smile. Rachel tried to smile back. There was a lump in her throat. She thanked the lawyer automatically and took her copy of the document, the divorce decree. Alex was also saying something to his lawyer. At the exit, they came face to face for a moment. Perhaps for the first time in a long time, they looked each other straight in the eye. Alex looked at her inquisitively. "Rachel, how are you?" "It's fine," she answered briefly. He nodded, looking down at the document in her hands. "Well, that's it." "That's it," she echoed. They were silent. There was probably still so much they wanted to say, but there was no need to. Finally, Alex said quietly, "I really regret everything." Rachel clutched the folder of papers tighter to her chest. "I know." She didn't add anything. Alex waited, as if hoping for more words, but Rachel remained silent. Then he nodded and opened the door for her. "Goodbye, Rachel." "Goodbye, Alex." She stepped over the threshold without turning around. Only when she heard the door slam shut did she allow herself to exhale. Tears welled up in her eyes, not stormy ones, but quiet, almost calm ones. Relief mixed with sadness. This really was the end. Linda was waiting for her in the parking lot, insisting on coming with her on this important day. Seeing her friend, Rachel smiled weakly through her tears and, coming up, hugged her tightly. "That's it," she whispered. "I'm free." Linda nodded, stroking her back. "You did everything right. Now only forward, do you hear?" Rachel wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "Go ahead," she repeated quietly. The two of them walked to the car, leaving behind the courthouse and a past life that had finally become history. Linda suggested they celebrate with a cup of hot chocolate at a nearby cafe. They sat by the window, watching the people hurrying down the street. Rachel wrapped her hands around the warm mug, her fingers shaking slightly. "How are you?" Linda asked softly. Rachel thought about it. "I don't know. It's like a weight has been lifted from my soul, but underneath the weight there's emptiness. I feel relieved, but also sad." "That's normal," nodded her friend. "You're not a robot. 30 years is a long time." Rachel sipped the sweet chocolate. I remember our wedding. I never would have thought then that everything would end like this. But apparently, such was fate. Linda put her hand on her arm. You did what you could. You fought for your family. Now the main thing is to take care of yourself. Rachel smiled faintly. You know, for some reason I remembered the first time I held Sarah in my arms in the maternity hospital. Then I thought, this is it, the meaning of my whole life, our family. And now, the family has changed, but it has not disappeared. My children are my meaning. For their sake, I will continue to live happily, if possible. Linda smiled, and for yourself, you might add. You deserve to be happy just like that on your own. Rachel nodded. She wasn't sure yet how this next chapter of her life would play out, but one thing was certain. She wouldn't hide in a shell of pain. She'd felt that especially clearly today over a cup of hot chocolate. The divorce had ended it all, and she was about to begin a new sentence in her story. Shall we go? She asked Linda, finishing her drink. I want to go home. For the first time. To my own home. Her friend nodded, paying at the checkout. As she walked out the door, Rachel glanced up at the sky. Even the gray winter sky didn't seem so gloomy now. She had her whole life ahead of her, and she stepped forward with a firm determination to live it well. 3 months had passed since the divorce was finalized. Outside, winter reigned supreme. White snow covered the streets, frost drew patterns on the glass. Rachel's house had become quieter, but she was gradually getting used to this silence. In the mornings, she no longer made 2 coffees, just one for herself. And she found that she even liked this new ritual, sitting with a mug of hot latte by the window, watching the winter sun gild the trees. Before, in the hustle and bustle, she did not allow herself such pauses. Inside, there was still pain from the unexpected memories, but it was easier to breathe. Rachel visited Dr. Bennett regularly, not every week anymore, but every 2 weeks. She noted her progress. Her sleep improved, her appetite returned. Rachel even gained a few kilos back. She tried to fill her days with things to do. She returned to her old hobby, painting. Once, before marriage, she had painted well, but then abandoned it. Now she got an old easel out of the closet, bought canvases and acrylic paints. The first attempts were uncertain, but the process captivated her. She could spend hours drawing brushstrokes, feeling her soul calming down. Rachel also started working part-time through a few connections. She managed to find a project for a couple of days a week, helping a small charity with marketing. The work was simple and mostly remote. She wrote texts for the website, ran the foundation's social media pages. It gave her a sense of being needed and distracted her from heavy thoughts. One of the paintings she worked on was particularly personal, an abstract image of a woman standing in the rain, but a ray of light breaks through the clouds. Rachel put her story into this image, the bitterness of loss and the hope for a ray of light. Each brushstroke seemed to draw the last of the pain from the soul. The painting turned out bright, contrasting. She herself was surprised at how much life and color poured out onto the canvas, despite the darkness of the events she had experienced. One January evening, Rachel turned on her laptop and went to a support forum for those who had survived infidelity. Dr. Bennett had recommended one. People were sharing stories, bitter ones, like her own, and stories of recovery. Rachel had long been embarrassed to write her own, so she simply read other people's stories. One post struck a chord with her, a woman describing how she had survived her husband's infidelity and, a year later, found inner peace. She wrote, "You are not alone, and recovery and healing are possible." These words warmed Rachel's heart, for it was loneliness and hopelessness that she feared most. She decided to leave a short comment herself, and then a post. She briefly told her story, how her children and friends supported her, how difficult it was to accept reality, but now she has been trying to rebuild her life for several months. Her message was responded to. They wished her strength. One woman even invited her to a personal correspondence. It turned out that she lives in a neighboring state. For the first time in a long time, Rachel felt a powerful sense of involvement. She really was not alone in her trouble. Millions of women and men went through something similar and came out on the other side. relations with the children gradually stabilized as well. Sarah was still angry with her father. She refused to come to him for Christmas, although he invited her. Christmas dinner was held at Rachel's house quietly, like a family, without much joy, but also without tears. Alex celebrated the holiday separately as far as Rachel knew. He went to his brother for a couple of days. The grandchildren, still small, did not ask unnecessary questions. They only noticed that their grandfather was not around, but they were told that he was at work. Her son, Jason, was more neutral. He didn't express anger, but there was a cold note in his voice when he mentioned his father. He regularly called his mother. They chatted via video link about all sorts of little things, about his studies, about her new hobby. Previously, Rachel admitted, she didn't call the children that often. Everyone was busy. Now, both Sarah and Jason tried to devote more time to her, as if they felt that she needed communication. One day, while flipping through the calendar, Rachel realized that she hadn't looked at the anniversaries section since the divorce. There, neatly handwritten, was still her and Alex's wedding date, February 5th. She thought about how soon this day would come, for the first time having no meaning for her. It was strange how many years they had celebrated, given each other gifts. Now they were just numbers on paper. At such moments, she still felt the twinges of sadness. But instead of wallowing in them, Rachel took a deep breath, as Dr. Bennett had taught her, and refocused herself on the present. And the present wasn't so bad. She might be alone, but she was alive, healthy, with her children and grandchildren nearby, a roof over her head, and even new little joys, her paintings, her contributions to the foundation. Sometimes she thought about Alex. To be honest, she tried, as the therapist advised, to let go of her anger. The doctor said that forgiveness was not for his sake, but for her own peace of mind. Rachel wasn't sure she was ready to forgive him for real. The wound was too deep. But she didn't wish him harm anymore. In fact, she didn't wish him anything. He had become a stranger. She knew little about his life, only what concerned the children. Once Alex sent her a long letter by email. He apologized again, said that he missed his family, that he understood everything. Rachel read it and did not answer. She did not see the point. It seemed to her that all the words had long since meant nothing. After that letter, he no longer bothered her with personal messages, only rare neutral letters on business, for example, to clarify the address for sending some document. Apparently, he was still with Emily. At least the kids mentioned that the woman still worked with him, and they seemed to show up together. But no one knew the details. Neither Sarah nor Jason were eager to take an interest in their father's affairs. Rachel found herself thinking that she herself did not care much anymore. Sometimes she even felt sorry he had ruined his own life, and now he was reaping the consequences. One Sunday, Rachel walked alone to church, wanting to find inner peace. During the service, she suddenly felt relief, as if a weight had been lifted. She silently thanked God for the good that was left to her. A timid hope was born in her soul that brighter days were still ahead. Even if her husband was not there, there would be children, there would be her own goal, and there would be peace in her heart, which had been missing for so long. Alex closed the lid of his laptop and rubbed his eyes tiredly. It was dark in the small living room of the rented apartment. Evening had long since fallen outside. Emily was staying late at work. Lately, she was coming home late more and more often. Alex was eating the pizza left over from lunch alone. The apartment was a mess. His shirt was lying on a chair. The table was covered with papers. Neither he nor Emily had time to make it cozy. Almost a year had passed since he left his family. Surprisingly, much of his appearance was the same job responsibilities. His colleagues, of course, knew everything. Office gossip quickly spread the news that Vice President Connor had divorced and was dating a marketing employee. At first, Alex felt glances behind his back, whispers. But then everyone got used to it. He himself did not react. Only his cheeks secretly burned with shame when the conversations in the smoking room suddenly died down at his appearance. Emily was also bothered by this. One day, a month ago, she came home irritated and blurted out from the doorway, "You know, my colleagues still whisper that I took you away from your family for the sake of a promotion. I can't stand to listen." Alex tried to calm her down, but deep down he knew she was nervous for a reason. Their affair, which had started as passion, gradually became routine. After work, they returned to this cramped apartment, had dinner, and watched TV. Sometimes they made love, but less and less often fatigue had settled between them too. Alex was often immersed in his thoughts, chewing over the past, suffering from insomnia. Emily several times suggested that they go on a trip together somewhere to the sea to take their minds off things. He brushed it off each time. Now is not the time, there are a lot of things to do. The truth was, he was no longer the same cheerful man Emily had met. Since the day he lost his family, Alex had aged a decade in spirit, and she was tired of it. The key turned in the door. Emily was back. She entered, tiredly took off her coat. Seeing that he was sitting in the dark, she flicked the switch, flooding the room with the cold light of the lamp. "Why didn't you turn on the light?" she asked indifferently. "I just finished a call and was thinking," he shrugged. She put her bag on the chair. "We need to talk." He felt a sick feeling in the pit of his stomach. Emily's tone made it clear. Nothing good. "I'm listening," he said quietly. She leaned against the table, crossing her arms. "Al, I can't do this anymore. This is all." She made a vague gesture with her hand. "It doesn't make sense." Alex was silent. It was as if he had been waiting for these words, but it still stung. "You're never yourself," she continued, plucking up her courage. "You're unhappy, I can see that, and you're unhappy with me too. It seems to me that you regret everything." "Amy, I'm sorry." He began, but she raised her hand, stopping him. "Let me tell you, I'm unhappy too, Al. I didn't want this. I didn't want broken lives. I thought we'd have love, a new family, but it turned out." She smiled bitterly. "You know, my colleagues are probably right. Nothing good comes out of office romances." "That's not true." He objected automatically, although he himself did not believe his words. "Of course. How many percent of such stories end happily?" She challenged me. Alex remembered some statistics he had seen out of the corner of his eye and couldn't find what to answer. "A couple of percent, if you believe the articles, were clearly not among them." "I think we should break up," Emily said bluntly, with a sigh of relief, as if she'd finally put the thought into words. "You've lost your family, I've tarnished my reputation. And for what? We don't make each other happy." "What if we try to fix something?" he asked weakly, not really believing it. She shook her head. "No, you understand. Everything is gone." He closed his eyes, feeling ashamed and sad. "I'm not holding you back, Amy. You're probably right." Tears glistened in her eyes, the first time in a long time he had seen her cry. Perhaps she, too, was crying over her dreams. "It's a shame it happened this way," she whispered. "Forgive me, too. If I hadn't tagged along with you then, maybe none of this would have happened." "It's all my fault," he shook his head. "You're young, you still have everything ahead of you. And I ruined my life myself." Emily let out a quiet sob and began to pack her things. It seemed she had decided to leave right then. Alex did not stop her. Half an hour later, having stuffed the last of her clothes into her bag, she stopped at the door. "Goodbye, Al," she said sadly. "Take care." "And you." "Goodbye," he barely said. The door closed. Alex sank down onto the sofa, feeling strangely empty. There was no shock, no great grief. It seemed as if his heart had gone numb long before this evening. He simply sat in silence, staring at the pale rectangle of light from the lantern on the wall. The thought was spinning in his head. It was all in vain. And the work that he sacrificed time with his family and this fleeting romance. He lost the most important thing, his wife, the respect of his children. For the sake of a few minutes of euphoria, he paid with years of suffering for everyone around him. The phone on the table vibrated, an incoming message. Alex picked up the device. It was a photo from Jason. His son had sent a picture from his graduation ceremony. He had completed his master's degree. In the photo, Jason was in a robe with his classmates nearby. No words of explanation. Alex's heart sank. He remembered Yes, today was his son's graduation. He knew the date, but he didn't dare go after everything. He wasn't sure his son wanted to see him there. Rachel was there. She told him she was going. She was probably still somewhere near Jason, proud and happy. Without him. He looked at the photo for a long time. Then he slowly typed out a reply, "Congratulations, son, you are our pride," and pressed send. There was no response, of course. But the fact that Jason had sent him the picture was a step, perhaps a cautious reconnection. Alex smiled sadly and stood up to finally turn on the light in the empty room. For the first time in a long time, he felt a tentative hope. Maybe not all was lost. Maybe someday his son and daughter would welcome him back into their lives. Alex sat awake the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling. Bitter thoughts pulsated in his head about how empty the external success he had been striving for had turned out to be. He remembered how he had once been proud of his position, his high income. He thought he was providing his family with a better life. But he had missed the main thing: closeness, trust, family happiness. By morning, he had made a decision. He dialed the CEO's number and quietly announced that he would resign at the end of the quarter. The CEO was surprised and tried to talk his valuable employee out of it, but Alex stood his ground. He had decided that he would no longer cling to status and power. Perhaps, by leaving the corporate world, he would find a way to atone for at least a small part of his guilt to devote time to volunteering or some social cause. Of course, this would not return what was lost, but at least it would give new meaning to his days. Alex hung up with some relief. For the first time in a long time, he had made a choice that was not his career. He hoped that someday, perhaps a long time from now, his children and Rachel would learn of his change and perhaps forgive him. He had a long atonement ahead of him, but he was willing to go through it for the chance to regain the respect of his son and daughter. Another year passed. The wound from the past had almost healed, although the scar remained forever. Rachel lived a full life. She worked with a charity, wrote articles about family support, and continued to draw. Her children and grandchildren were nearby. Everything seemed to fall into place. In April, Rachel's eldest grandson, Sarah's son, turned 5. To mark the occasion, their daughter organized a small celebration in a country park, with balloons, a picnic, and games for the children. Rachel was one of the first to arrive to help with the preparations. As the other guests began to arrive, Rachel was surprised to see a familiar figure in the parking lot. It was Alex. Sarah hadn't told her she'd decided to invite her father, but Rachel didn't mind. She knew that sooner or later the kids would need to interact with their grandfather. Alex looked a little confused, holding a gift wrapped in bright paper. He noticed Rachel and smiled uncertainly. She nodded at him and was surprised that she felt neither a sting of pain nor anger, just a quiet sadness and at the same time a strange calm. The day was warm, birds were chirping all around. Children were running around the meadow, playing with a ball. Rachel adjusted the ribbons on the gift balls from time to time, admiring how her grandchildren burst into laughter. It was the laughter of a new life that continued despite everything. The birthday boy, 5-year-old Tommy, looked shyly at the unfamiliar man at first, but Sarah led her son on. "This is Grandpa Alex." The boy smiled and extended his hand, and Alex, his voice shaking slightly, congratulated his grandson and handed him a gift, a large Lego set. Tommy squealed happily, immediately drawing his new friends to show off the gift. Rachel watched this scene from the side. Tears came to her eyes not from pain, but from some kind of tenderness. Despite everything, her children were trying to restore relations with their father, at least for the sake of their children. Sarah was restrained, but did not drive Alex away, allowing him to play with the grandchildren. Jason also came. He shook his father's hand. Tension was still in the air, but at least everyone tried to behave respectfully. When it was time to take the photo, Sarah suddenly called out, "Mom, Dad, come on over. Let's all take a picture together." She looked at her mother a little sheepishly, but Rachel nodded wordlessly. Alex also gratefully took his place next to his son and daughter. Tommy settled into his grandmother's arms, the youngest grandson into his grandfather's. The camera clicked. In the picture, they looked a little tense, but still all together. It was a kind of family portrait, which a year ago would have seemed unthinkable. Rachel felt a quiet pride. Their family had gone through a difficult test, but managed not to fall to pieces. At the picnic, the former spouses barely spoke. There was no need. Each was busy. Rachel setting the table, Alex communicating with the children. But when the party came to an end and the guests began to leave, they found themselves next to each other, collecting plates and cups scattered across the meadow. "Thank you for helping," Rachel said politely. "It's nothing," Alex replied. He hesitated, then quietly added, "And thank you for not objecting to my presence." Rachel shook her head. "Tommy's glad to see you, and it's been hard on Sarah, too, keeping you away. I—" She exhaled. "I'm glad you're talking again. It's better for the kids." Alex looked down in relief. "I was afraid you were against it. Thank you." They spent a few minutes silently putting the plastic dishes into bags. Finally, Rachel spoke up. "I heard you left the company," Jason told me. "Yes," Alex nodded. "Last year. Now I'm helping out at a youth center. As a volunteer, you could say." "That's commendable," she responded sincerely. "I've learned a lot lately," he said, looking at the horizon where the sun was setting. "Everything I've achieved has turned out to be dust without a family." Rachel remained silent. He looked at her with a hint of hope. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. You've already given me everything. The divorce was the most merciful thing you could do. But tell me, were you able to let go of the resentment, at least a little?" She met his gaze. There was so much remorse and loneliness in his eyes that she suddenly felt sorry for this aged, gray-haired man. Once he was her love, her support. That man is no more, but this one is not a stranger either. He is the father of her children and the grandfather of her grandchildren. "I think so," Rachel said quietly. "I let go. I won't forget, but I don't live with that pain anymore." Alex nodded quickly, looking away, his eyes seeming to moisten. "Thank you. You're an amazing woman, Rachel. I'm sorry I realized it too late." She smiled sadly. "Just take care of yourself. And our children, they still need a father, even though they are adults." "I'll try," he nodded seriously. "We have to go, Mom," Sarah called from afar, calling her mother to the car. Rachel looked at Alex. "Bye. Until next time." "See you later," he repeated quietly. She turned and walked toward the children. Her heart beat steadily. The past could not be returned, but there was still life ahead. Rachel knew that she had the strength to live it well, with peace in her soul and with love for those who truly deserved it. She smiled, believing that many bright days lay ahead of her. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.